I had just finished up on a date with a Mexican girl at this restaurant right behind me here. We were standing out here right by the road waiting for our Uber when this guy pulls up. He comes over and yells at her, "What is this?" And then he looks at me and he goes, "Do you know who I am?" And I was confused about what was going on. I was like, "No." And he goes, "I'm her boyfriend." More on that story later. I moved to Mexico about 4 years ago with my girlfriend, but for about the past year, I've been single and dating. So in this video, I'm gonna tell you what it's been like dating in Mexico, what it's been like dating Mexicans, dating other expats, cultural differences, all sorts of stuff like that. And let me tell you, I have some interesting stories that I'm gonna share in this video. One question I hear a lot on the dating topic is, how do I meet single women in Mexico? Well, there's two main ways that I meet women here, and one is through dating apps like Tinder, and another is just in my everyday life, whether that's going out to bars or restaurants, going to the gym, someone who's my waitress. And I happen to be at the right age where if I have a medical appointment of any kind, there's a decent chance that the doctor is going to be a good-looking woman of my age. So first, let's start with Tinder. What is this? Well, it's an app where I have a profile and I can see the profiles of other women. And I can swipe right on them if I'm interested and left if I'm not interested. And if we both swipe right on each other, well then that's called a match, and then you can start messaging the other person. I've used Tinder in the US, and there, to match with the prettiest girls, you either basically have to look like Bradley Cooper or have a shirtless profile picture showing your six-pack abs standing next to your Ferrari. And since I neither had a Ferrari nor looked like Bradley Cooper, I was basically a nobody on Tinder in the US. While in Mexico, on the other hand, every time I've gone in the app, I've matched with drop-dead gorgeous women. So it's been a completely different experience here in Mexico than in the US. Something that has really enhanced my Tinder experience is having Tinder Platinum. It's about $50 US a year, but it is so worth it. For example, here's a couple ways that it helped me out. If you like a pretty girl, well, there's a good chance she'll never see your profile because the prettiest ones on there just get so many likes that they only ever see a small percentage of the profiles of the people who have liked them. Well, if you have Tinder Platinum, you get moved to the front of the line. So if I like a girl, the next time she comes online, I'm prioritized over all those people who do not have Tinder Platinum, so she sees my profile pretty quickly. Another feature I love about Tinder Platinum is I can see all of the girls who have already liked me. This is actually the reason why I met my current girlfriend. Yeah, that's right, I have a girlfriend now. By the way, if you want to meet her, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell because I think she's going to be in next week's video. But I saw that she had already liked me, and then I looked at her profile. I thought she was really pretty. I liked her profile, so I clicked like as well, and that's how we started chatting. So what has it been like dating in Mexico? Well, I'm going to separate this into two categories. One category, dating Mexicans, and the other category, dating other foreigners who are living here. Let's start with what it's been like to date other expats. Well, to be perfectly honest, I find that I click super easily with other expats living here. And I think the reason for this is that we both made this huge decision to move abroad to Mexico. So to start off, we have this one gigantic thing in common. And because we both made this huge decision, I think that usually results in us having a lot of other commonalities as well. So I found it really easy to meet and get along with other expats who are living here, whether that's just as friends or in a dating context. And now for the topic I know a lot of you want to know about, what it's been like dating Mexican women. Now when talking about cultural differences, I'm going to be generalizing a lot because you have to when you're doing this kind of thing. First, let's talk about who's expected to pay. Well, in the US, when I would go out on dates, I think generally the man is expected to pay. However, there when the check would come, my date would generally reach for her purse, and then I felt like it was kind of expected for me to be like, "No, don't worry, I got it," or "No, how about I get this one and you get ice cream," or something like that. But here in Mexico, I'm not sure I've had a single date with a Mexican girl where she reached for her purse when the bill came. So I think there's definitely more of an expectation for the guy to pay here in Mexico. Another big cultural difference is the level of flakiness. This was such a big frustration for me in the US because it seemed like about half of the dates that I would schedule, they would cancel on me. Whereas here in Mexico, once I have a date scheduled, there's like a 90% chance that that's going to happen. Of course, sometimes things come up, someone has to stay late at work, or they get sick, you know, those kind of things. It happens, but flakiness is a whole lot less of a problem here than it was in the US, at least in my experience. Another big cultural difference is that in the US, it's not only okay, but it's almost expected that you're dating multiple people. At least this applies to my generation. Now, you go out with multiple people until you have the exclusive talk with one of them, and then it's at that point that you say goodbye to those others. But here in Mexico, you're more so expected to only be dating one person at a time. Now, that's not to say when a girl finds out that you're dating other people that things are over between you. At least if you're honest, in my experience, well then, those relationships can continue. I'll give you a couple examples. The first example happened around the time I started dating in Mexico. I had recently gone out with one girl, let's call her Sarah, and then I went out with a second girl, let's call her Maria, and I went on one date with Maria, it went well, so then I went out on a second date with Maria, and on that second date, she asked me straight up if I was seeing anyone else. So I was honest with her and said, yeah, I've recently gone out with one other person. And then I was really shocked at her next question. She asked to see a picture of her. I knew this was a trap. I knew this was a trick question, but I went along with it anyway. And she takes a look at the picture and says something like, oh, she's kind of old. So I thought it was interesting that she was throwing a dig at this other girl to like elevate herself in my eyes, like as if it's a competition or something, which I guess it sort of is, but it's weird that it played out like that. But I thought it was interesting that on the same date that she found out I was going out with someone else, she invited me up to her cabin in the mountains for 5 days alone, just her and I. And this is only our second date. So I couldn't believe how fast this was moving. And I just politely said, you know, while that sounds awesome and I'm sure it'd be a lot of fun, I think I would like to get to know you a little better first. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is what happens next. So I go out on a date with another girl. And on our very first date, she straight up asked me exactly what Maria did. Am I going out with anyone else? And I was honest with her. And I was like, yeah, I've recently been out with 2 other women. And then she asked me the same question, the same follow-up question that Maria did. I couldn't believe it. She asked to see pictures of them. So again, I showed her pictures. And this time she looks at the first picture and she's like, her nose is kind of, oh, I'm not going to talk bad about anyone else. So I thought that was super interesting that they both asked if I was dating anyone else. They both asked if they could see pictures of the other girls. And then they both threw like a dig at the girl she was looking at a picture of. But then it got even more interesting. This is my first date with this girl. And around the end of the date, she asked me if I want to take a birthday trip with her that weekend to Puerto Vallarta. And I was like, oh, who'd be going? Oh, just you and I. So it was the same series of questions with both girls, and then they both invited me on a trip that weekend with just her and I. So I found this whole situation super peculiar. So my take from this is that Mexican girls are very competitive with one another in that kind of way. And being invited on those 2 trips, it got me thinking, like, what's the purpose of this? Is this just to get me away from anyone else and make sure they have me to themselves for several days so I can't go out with anyone else? Or is this them trying to get their chance to win me over? I'm not sure, but either way, I found it super peculiar. So as I'm sharing these stories, keep in mind that this is all happening over the course of almost a year. So even if someone were to only go on one date every 2 weeks, over the course of the year, you're still looking at about 25 dates. So for this part of the video, I have one more kind of crazy story for you. And remember that girl who after our first date asked me if I wanted to take a solo trip with her to Puerto Vallarta for her birthday? Well, I went out with her again, and on our second date, in 100% seriousness, she told me that she loved me and that we should get married. I mean, this totally threw me for a loop. I was just like... But you know, that's enough of the crazy stories for now. Stick around till the end and I'll finish that story about the girl's boyfriend pulling up after our date. So although I gave you some examples of some Mexican girls who've wanted to move very fast in relationships, much faster than I was comfortable with, overall, it's been a really cool experience. The vast majority of them have been a pleasure to hang out with, great company, they have big hearts in general, and I don't think a single one has tried to take advantage of me on dates by ordering expensive things on the menu or something like that. But yeah, overall, if I can group Mexican women into one box, I have to say that I really enjoy them. I like spending time with them and they're good people. A question I get a lot is your Spanish good enough to go out with a girl who doesn't speak English? And the answer to that is yes. However, they learn pretty quickly not to use a bunch of slang around me and also to speak clearly. So with those two caveats, yes. And now as for how many women my age here speak English, well, I would say about 50% of the women here in Querétaro, my age, have a pretty good understanding of English and can carry on conversations well. And I would say that number goes up to 75% if I include the women who can speak decent English. And then I would say about 25% know little to no English. If I were texting someone through WhatsApp or messaging them on Tinder, normally those conversations would be in Spanish, but then we would get to the date, and then that would usually start off in Spanish, and sometimes, depending on how it was going, sometimes we'd do a little bit of Spanglish, mix of English and Spanish, and other times we would switch over to English completely. It just totally depended on the vibe and what we were most comfortable with. I've met several different guys over my few years in Mexico who didn't know any Spanish whatsoever and were dating girls who didn't know any English. This is a totally foreign concept to me, but when they were going out and communicating, they were doing it exclusively through translation apps like Google Translate. So it's something that can be done if neither one of you knows the language and you want it bad enough, but for me, that's not something I feel comfortable doing. Someone left a comment on this channel saying something along the lines of, be careful when you're dating in Mexico because a lot of Mexican women are just looking for an American guy to get married to get to the US. Now, that comment got upvoted a lot, so it seems that a lot of people shared that same perspective. Now, that hasn't been my experience at all. Almost every Mexican girl I've gone out with here is well educated, they have a high paying job, they're like a engineer or a supply chain manager or a dentist or a doctor or a lawyer, something like that. And their families here, their friends are here, they were born and raised here and have no intention of leaving whatsoever. And also, they're almost all very close with their family and want to stay near their family. Something else I've been asked quite a few times is, do I think a lot of the Mexican women here are gold diggers? And I would say the vast majority are not. I mean, most of them, at least the ones I've gone out with, come from middle to upper class families. Most of their parents are business owners. They've gone to college. A lot of them have higher education. They're in a high paying career and like they support themselves. They generally live alone. And yeah, like, would it be okay to be with a guy who has money? Sure. Is it a requirement? To me, it doesn't seem like it. Now, with almost all things, of course, there are exceptions to the rule. And when it comes to a woman being a gold digger, well, there was one example of a girl I was going out with where it came out eventually that, yeah, it was obvious that she just wanted a guy with money, with various things she had said to me along the way, talking about dating rich men, and one time she suggested that she wanted to find someone who could provide her a monthly allowance of 1,000,000 pesos or about 50,000 US dollars. So yeah, there are exceptions to everything, but vast majority I would say no, not gold diggers. Another question that I've been asked a lot is, hey, I'm a single straight guy. what's the best place for me to go in Mexico if I'm looking to date? And if you're looking for a Latina woman, I would say that any one of the big developed cities in Mexico is going to give you a lot of options of beautiful women, like Querétaro, there's a ton of them here, a Mexico City, a Guadalajara, places like that. But if you're coming to Mexico looking to date other expats, other foreigners, I think the single best place in Mexico for you is actually Puerto Vallarta. And this may come as a surprise because Puerto Vallarta is known for its huge male gay community. And the thing is, very few of the single males there are straight, whereas there's a lot of straight women there who have very few options to choose from. So Puerto Vallarta is my #1 recommendation for the straight single male looking to date other foreigners. Another question I've been asked a lot is, what does my typical date look like in Mexico? Well, I'd say that more often than not, I'm taking her out for drinks. Another common thing is going out for like street food or tacos or something like that. And then a less common date is going out for coffee, lunch, or dinner. But I've also done things where I've gone out in nature with them, gone just strolling around Centro, something like that. But something I'll never do, at least when I'm first getting to know the person, is go to the movies with them. I think going to the movies is one of the worst first date ideas because you're just sitting there awkwardly, not talking, when you should be getting to know the person. So yeah, basically I'm open to anything but going to the movies. So now let me finish telling you that story that I started at the very beginning of this video. So I just finished a date with this girl and we were waiting out by the road for our Uber. This guy pulls up, comes over, yells at her, "What the hell is this?" And then turns to me, says, "Do you know who I am?" I'm like, "No." And he says, "I'm her boyfriend." And I was like, hey man, I didn't know, I don't want any trouble. I'm sorry. And then he's like, "I'm not mad at you," and then turns his attention back to her and is yelling at her, saying things like, "I knew you've been sneaking around behind my back." And thankfully, after a little bit of an altercation, nothing physical, he didn't try to throw down or anything, although I thought he was going to, he speeds off. And then this girl is there with me, just like kind of in shock, not knowing what to do, not knowing what to say. And she swears to me that this guy is just her friend and that he's bipolar and has some mental health issues and that they are not in a relationship. And honestly, I didn't really know what to think, although my gut was telling me not to believe her at the time. But many months later, just yesterday, I was coming home in an Uber and I saw them walking down the sidewalk together, that girl and that guy holding hands. So it seems that my gut was maybe right at that time.